At the core of you and your sort of self-identity, being gay is a really important part of that.
Sure, being gay is a big part of that, because that has a connection to love, and who I love, and who I spend my life with, and the family that I'm going to build. But also where I grew up in the United States probably formed who I am. So growing up in the South, in a very conservative atmosphere, growing up in the military, and understanding what that meant.
You had an awareness of being different and of being gay, whether you put it that way to yourself or not. You had an awareness that you were different very early in your childhood.
Oh, sure.
And that was something that in the community you came from, the religion that you were born into, that was tough.
You mean with the Mormons? Yeah.
Well, your mum was a pretty observant Mormon, wasn't she?
My mom, my father's entire side of the family were very devout Mormon. I was very devout Mormon growing up, so I believed what I was hearing, including around 7 years old, the church beamed in the Mormon prophet from Salt Lake City. We were living out in Texas, and they lowered a screen, and his white-haired, face came on that screen, very, very
as
imposing.
Close to God as you could probably get.
I mean, it was very godlike. It was very intimidating. And I'll never forget him saying, next to the sin of murder comes the sin of sexual impurity, homosexuality. Now, I might not have known what that meant at that moment, but I soon learned. It meant that I would bring great shame to myself and to my family if anyone found out that I had a crush on the boy down the street, which I did. That I would also be going to hell. I would not be with my Heavenly Father. And that if I did fall in love, it would be something that would have to be hidden, suppressed. There's no one to discuss it with, because you'd be in trouble with anyone you discussed it with. If I discussed it in the military, you couldn't even be openly gay in the military at the time. You'd be kicked out. If I discussed it with anyone in our society, which was very conservative of it at the time, I would be in great trouble. In some places, it was still a crime.
You'd sort of be expelled.
I would certainly be expelled from the things that create community where I'm from. So from my church, and from my neighborhood, and from my school, I would be a pariah. That creates isolation. And that isolation makes young, talented LGBTQ people fade and stop trying to excel, stop trying to stick out in positive ways. And for me, that isolation ultimately lent to thoughts of taking my own life. Because you tell a young person that when they first feel love, that's not going to lead to things like dates and the prom or marriage, but that it could lead to prison or electroshock therapy and certainly disownment from your church and your home. You start to wonder, what is the purpose of living?
You took the decision. You came out to your mother. It must have been very difficult, but I think when you were 21.
Yeah, I was 21 years old. I didn't mean to come out. We were in the military. We were living in Washington, D.C. now, and I was just home for Christmas. And we just would sit up and talk all night long. And you have to understand, my mom had been paralyzed from a young age, so she was very different too. But she remained very, very conservative. And at a certain point, I just wasn't giving anything to the conversation. I wasn't speaking, so she filled in all the blanks, and she was very mad about this thing called don't ask, don't tell, which was a law at the time that as long as no one found out you were gay or lesbian
in the military, as long as you didn't say you were gay.
As long as you kept it quiet, which was basically saying stay in the closet, who you are and what you are is shameful, and it not only hurt the people in the military but their kids. My mom didn't see it that way. She was angry because it let gay or lesbian people in any form. These people she had been taught were next to murderers in terms of sin. These people who were wrong and sick and broken, and she just kept going on and on about it. And I came out because at a certain point, even though I was literally praying not to, I could feel the warmth of my tears hit my cheeks. And a good Southern mom can read those tears. She said she knew when I started to cry, I'll get teary just thinking back to that moment. Because I didn't want to come out, I wasn't ready to come out. In fact, that coming out experience, her reaction to it, I'll never forget. She just got very, very quiet, her heart breaking, knowing her son would face some challenges she didn't want him to, and she just said, why? Why would you choose this? Because that's what her thought was. And I'll never forget pointing to her braces and her crutches, because she was paralyzed from polio, on the bed, and I said, Mom, why did you choose those? And she didn't have an answer for that. That was the beginning of our conversation. It was not easy. She did not immediately accept me, but there was a lot of unlearning that had to be done. A lot of that unlearning happened when she met my gay and lesbian friends when she came to my graduation from UCLA's film school. And she started to hear the stories of actual gay and lesbian young people, and they didn't match up to what she'd heard from that Mormon prophet or from the military or from the state at the time. Those personal stories, not political stories, not stories about the Constitution or science, but those personal stories from these young people and myself eventually erased the generations of homophobia she'd learned from the church and from the state. And it was gone. And I'll never forget, after a night near my graduation when she'd spent an entire evening with my gay friends, that she finally held me and hugged me. And in those tears, I knew that the lies and the myths and distortions about being gay were gone.
Because that was love.
That was love, and that was loving me for who I am and understanding there was not a flaw in that. There was not fault in that.